Hi there, I'm Meryem, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of TitanML, and I'm really, really excited to be here. Believe it or not, within the next 10 years, the text that's produced in your organization will be read first by an AI before it's read by a person or a human. Now, this is a pretty outlandish claim, and I'm sure there are probably some skeptical faces in the audience, people thinking about things like data privacy and hallucination and how you're even going to manage that. And they're all completely valid and good points. But today I want to talk about why this needs to happen for our organizations to have that competitive advantage and how we can start that journey to make that happen. I'm Meryem. I'm the co-founder and CEO of TitanML, and I'm a staunch believer in the power of AI, not just for productivity gains, like everyone keeps talking about, but to enhance human potential and creativity. And today, I invite you to join us on our journey to AI everywhere. Today, I'm going to talk about three things. The first one is I'm going to justify this claim of why I think there's going to be AI everywhere. It's a pretty outlandish claim, and I think it needs some justification. I'm then going to talk about what it means to have this differentiated AI everywhere and what capabilities we need to make that happen. And then thirdly, I'm going to talk about how we can get started today. So let's start with envisioning AI everywhere. So you may or may not know this, but at least 80% of the data and information within your organizations is actually unstructured data. In fact, I was with a client last week, and for them, it was 99% of their data was unstructured. So for those of you who don't know what structured and unstructured data is, well, structured data is, I'm sure, what a lot of the people in this room are very familiar with. It's essentially anything that can be represented, or a chart, or a graph, or a table. It's typically stored in databases and CSVs. But this is actually the tiny minority of the data that we have in our orgs. The vast majority is this unstructured data. So this is the emails, this is the documents, this is the research reports, this is the contracts, the social media feeds, the news. And this information is actually what powers our organization, not the structured data, even though that is very, very important. But despite it being the vast majority of the knowledge that's stored in our enterprises, we're actually really bad at analyzing and understanding this unstructured data. So for our structured data, we have a bunch of different ways that we can analyze it. You have entire data engineering teams and data analyst teams. We have techniques like linear regression and financial modeling. In fact, this is probably a lot of the workflows that you do already on Dataiku today, is to analyze the structured data. But with this unstructured data, which remember is the most important data that we have, we're really bad at analyzing it and processing it. In fact, the only real method that we have is human processing. And this is the same human processing that we've been doing for decades and decades and decades. And humans are pretty bad at analyzing this kind of data on this kind of scale. We're relying on people to pull together a research report they read 3 years ago with a paragraph and a contract they read last week with an email they got today. And that is a very big thing to ask. So when we have humans doing all of this processing, what we end up with is slow analysis and a lot of missed information and missed opportunity. But for the first time, we now have technology that is very, very good at processing this unstructured data, that's able to tap into that gold mine that previously was pretty untapped. And that's what we have with LLMs. And currently, they're as good as maybe an intern in your organization, but within the next 5 years, they'll be as good as an associate. And then within the next 10 years, I don't think we'll get to AGI, but we'll have something very, very impressive. So it's a complete no-brainer that we would have AI be reading and looking at all of this information that we have in our orgs before it's read by humans, so humans can focus on the most interesting and impactful areas. So I think AI is going to be everywhere. And we've already talked this morning, Connor gave a great talk about what it means to have differentiated AI. Now, what does it mean to have differentiated AI everywhere? So I think that AI will be differentiated because it has access to your proprietary and business critical data. The thing that will make it differentiated is the thing that your competitors don't have, which is your data and your know-how. But For a subset of your AI everywhere models, data privacy and control will be of the utmost importance. So for the rest of the talk, what I want to focus on is how we can make sure that the AI that is embedded within our organizations is both secure and private and totally within your control. So the question that I'm going to pose to you is how you access your AI. And broadly, there's two ways of accessing them, and Jed did a very good job earlier of explaining them. The first, which is the API-hosted model, which actually the vast majority of POCs are done on, is when you have a model, but it's actually hosted in a third-party environment. It's actually not your model, it's their model. And you send query and data to that model, and you take back the responses, and you interact through an API. But some people don't know that you're also able to self-host these models within your own environment. So this is what we see on the right, where you can have your application speaking to your model within the four walls of your VPC or on-prem data center. And we call this self-hosting. And for a subset of the AI models that you'll be deploying, it will be completely vital that you are able to self-host. So building these self-hosting capabilities are essential if we're going to build this AI everywhere world. It's going to allow us to have those private deployments for your most sensitive data. But also, and I don't think this is talked about enough, we're going to be able to achieve this AI independence where we're not reliant on a particular vendor. I mean, we saw a couple months ago how unstable organizations like OpenAI can be. And we'll have also total control over the model as well. So we'll be able to control the update cycles, when we're going to fine-tune it, when we're not, and exactly what that toolchain looks like. And the added bonus, which I haven't included on this, is that it's actually cheaper and more scalable when done well. So building these capabilities are essential. Now, for the next 2 minutes, I'm going to talk about the yada yada that Jed talked about earlier. So Jed, you can go get a drink or something. You don't have to listen to this bit. So I'm going to talk very briefly about what the capabilities we need to be able to self-host. And this is an entirely whistle-stop tour. So in my purple box, I have essentially what we interact with when we're using an API-based model. So I have a developer, which is my thing in white, and then I have an API, and I query and response it. But we're taking for granted all of the infrastructure that they built on the back end, which when we're self-hosting, we're now responsible for. So the first thing that we'll need is maybe we'll need a batching server to process our requests. There are obviously some complexities. Different batching schemes will work for some models, but not others. And also getting this batching scheme right is really important for getting ultimate GPU utilization. We'll then, once we've processed through these requests, need to send them to an AI model. So there are fortunately a very, very rich landscape of open source AI models that we can pick from. Things like Llama and Mistral or Mixtral or whatever fine-tuned variants of those that you might pick. Complexity here is that typically when you run these, they're pretty slow and they need really expensive GPUs to be able to run. But luckily, there's a lot of things we can do here. So we'll have things like inference optimization, put it through runtime engines and do techniques like speculative decoding to make my inference much, much, much faster. It'll still need expensive GPUs, but at least it'll be fast. But then I can do things to make it also cheaper and be able to run on smaller GPUs. So do things like memory optimization. So a key technique that we see here is quantization. So this is when we essentially reduce the precision of the numbers within our AI models. And there's ways you can do this which actually don't impact the accuracy very significantly. I now have a model that is faster and cheaper, and I will then deploy that on a bunch of GPUs provided by our friends at NVIDIA. And I might then want to do things that can make sure the output of the model is very good, especially if I'm using it for analytics purposes. I might want to have controllers or enforcers that enforce the outputs in JSON or a regex form. And then I'm going to need all kind of good things like logging and monitoring as well. And this is a whole bunch of yada yada. It's a lot. But we do need to build these capabilities for some of our models, for some of our use cases. We'll have it much more private, at scale cheaper, have that control and have that independence. However, you do need expertise, can be costly if it's done wrong as well, and you do end up with a bit of infrastructural sprawl, and actually counterintuitively, it can be difficult to swap models. But as my favorite song goes, nobody said it would be easy. but also nobody said it would be this hard. So let's think about how we can get started today. Building all of this infrastructure is not something I would recommend unless you are OpenAI or Anthropic. It's just not really worth your time. But fortunately, that's what we do at TitanML. We provide all of that software infrastructure so you can host these self-hosted models and interact with them as easily as if you're using an API-based model. So where do we start? Well, we always start with your secure environment. We don't have a cloud. We have no intention of ever having a cloud. We start with your environment only. We then deploy our optimized AI inference infrastructure, which includes a lot of the stuff that I've talked about before, but you can also see an etc. We have an entire team internally dedicated to doing this inference optimization research. We can then pick your model. So you can choose from tens of thousands of models, all different types, from LLMs to audio models to re-ranker models. And in fact, the best use cases actually have a combination of them. So you might have a generative model speaking to an embedding model, speaking to an image model. And what's really beautiful about this infrastructure is you can also very easily swap the models in and out as well. And finally, you interact with them through an API. You interact with the container through an API. So you have the same experience as if you're building with these API-based models. So why did we build this? Well, firstly, we are a passionate believer in private deployments. We think that actually the vast majority of AI is going to be deployed privately. We secondly came from research backgrounds and think that a lot of AI is deployed in a way that is not very performant. So in fact, a lot of our clients, when we first deploy the models, see about 50 to 90% compute cost savings. And we spend a lot of time and effort researching this. It's totally MLOps ready, so it can fit into your SageMaker pipeline or Kubernetes infrastructure. And we also spend a lot of time optimizing for enterprise use cases. So use cases like document processing and RAG, retrieval augmented generation. And we have things like model controllers and LoRa adapters that are all ready. Plus a bunch more stuff that we have baked in to what we do that you guys will really benefit for when you start to scale. The reason I'm here today, and I'm very thankful to our hosts at Dataiku, is that we're now a part of the LLM mesh, and you can use the Titan takeoff inference server models as part of your amazing work that you're doing in the LLM mesh. So what this means is that you can have this controlled and secure AI while building with all of the great tooling that Dataiku provides. And because you're working with two great infrastructure providers, you're really minimizing that complexity and infrastructural burden, but you still have an application that's ready to scale and is very, very high performance as well. So today, what I've talked about is that I really think there's going to be AI everywhere in every single part of your organization. And that means it's going to touch private, sensitive data. It's going to need to be deployed sometimes within your own environment. And the time to start building up these self-hosting capabilities is now. And we're really excited to be working with Dataiku to make this happen. So please connect with me on LinkedIn, or I'd love to have a chat in the break. And you can also learn more on the left. But thank you so much for listening. And thanks for having me, Dataiku.